Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you're having a great day. Let's talk about productivity. We'll have a little bit of a productivity video here. How being a dad made me more productive. So a lot of these lessons that I talk about you can find in this book, Keys to Prolific Creativity. You can get it on my Patreon or you can just buy it off of Amazon. How did being a dad make me more productive? Well, it enhanced my understanding of the value of time. So even though my time has been really intensely impacted by having children, that is to say, children take up a lot of your time, they take up a lot of your energy, they take up a lot of your thought cycles, your thought processes, all of that really adds up to time. Even though they do all that, they enhance your productivity basically because they make you reevaluate how you spend your time. Now, I was really lucky enough to learn the lessons of the importance of habits. And in fact, that's probably the big lesson of this book is whatever habits you establish, that's what's going to produce the results that you want, whether it is finishing your book or becoming a better guitar player or becoming a better piano player, whatever it's going to be, becoming a better artist. It really boils down to the habits that you are able to enforce. So I learned really the hard way against my own nature in some ways. I learned how to incorporate habits into my life and to be a diligent worker. And those habits yield a lot of positive benefits to my life that then allowed me to get married and have children. But once I had children and the time crunch really happens, then you realize that despite your thinking that you're really efficient with your time, you're actually not. So every time you do something when your time is under a crunch, you have to really evaluate the value of spending your time doing that. And it's not that I don't waste any time. In fact, I think very often about how much time I waste and how I could have been more efficient any given day. Done this instead of that. Instead of wasting time with this, I could have done this. I'm always evaluating how I could do things better. I'm trying not to judge myself too harshly because I think you also need to relax. Like consume art is one of the keys to prolific creativity. You need to be able to relax a little bit too. So you shouldn't have this goal of 18 hours a day of uptime, like 18 hours a day to work and 6 hours to sleep. I'm not going to condone that. But anytime you spend your time, you start to think about its alternate utility a little more intensely. So when you have all day to spend practicing guitar, you could say, well, I practiced 8 hours today. Aren't I a good, diligent little worker bee? And you can really easily become a practice zombie. That's a phenomenon I talk about in the book. These are people who practice a lot but don't get any better. Why? Because they're not really focusing on improving. They're not focusing on the things they can't do yet as a player. But when you have an hour to play every day, that hour has to be productive. You can't spend your time doing things that make you feel good. You can't spend your time doing things that, reinforce something about the ego. You have to spend your time being productive. And so if I'm looking at my current guitar practice in light of this, I've changed the way that I practice over the last year pretty significantly because sometimes you get good at things and those things need to be reduced in the frequency with which you revisit them. Okay. Once you know a piece, you don't have to play it as often. So what I would hear practice zombies do way back, in my college days, they'd go into a practice room and they'd play the same like 5 pieces that they knew really well and they could play really good. And they would focus on polishing the last 1% of them if they were focusing on anything. Well, how do they never get gigs? Well, they could never learn enough music to play a gig. How do you learn enough music to play a gig? Well, once you know a piece, that has to basically drop out of the practice schedule to make room for other things. And so now, because my practice time is much more under a crunch, I have to decide every day what I'm going to do. I used to do a lot more technical exercises because I was trying to build up my right hand and left hand coordination a little bit. I was trying to be a better plectrum player because I've been a classical guitarist most of my life. And once I started to get really good at these really difficult scale exercises I designed, where you're shifting between all these different positions as you go. Sorry if I'm bumping the mic. You're shifting between all these different positions as you go up the neck. And once I started to get good at those, I realized I needed to do them less, and it also took me less time to do them. because you could play them at a faster tempo. So that means you have more room for other things. The same thing when I kind of finished this last piece I wrote and it's fairly polished. The only thing I really have to do is play through it, not even every day. I can play through it every couple of days, figure out where kind of I'm missing and just kind of polish that little part. And then otherwise I get to work on composing new music. And so the goal of every practice session is really, I am moving one step forward in some direction. I am coming up with new ideas. I'm taking the ideas that I came up with and I'm performing them better. I'm working out the kinks. I am changing tempos. I'm working with this metronome value or that metronome value. So every day you're doing something that is more difficult. And so if you were to listen to my playing in isolation, just like randomly drop in, you'd be like, wow, he sounds like crap. Well, it's because I'm playing things I can't play yet. And the goal is to make things polished for the performance. The performance is the only thing that matters if it's good. You know what I mean? So anyway, I've changed my practice habits on the guitar quite a bit as I've progressed through different skill levels and worked on one thing, come up with new ideas. And so anytime I sit down, if I spin my wheels during a day of practice, I'm aware that I did it for to please myself, to pat myself on the back and say, like, good boy, you know how to play that music. That's really not the way to practice. You need to focus on what you can't do yet. Likewise, as a writer, you start to focus a lot more on how is this contributing to the final product, right? Is this a story that's worth writing? That's something that I never really evaluated before I became a dad. And that's fine because I had to do a lot of exploratory writing, had to do a lot of exercise to get my chops, to get better at what I'm doing. And that was really important. But once I became a dad, it was like I could work on this book that people aren't going to read. And anytime I did that, I was just aware that basically I flushed a couple hours down the toilet by writing a story that no one really would care about. And I had to really think about, okay, is this a thing that I want to do despite all of that? Is it going to make me better? Well, maybe it'll make me better. But, you start to really evaluate that. Whereas before you could just I'll just try this out and see where it goes. And if your story kind of goes to nowhere, there's no imperative to finish your projects. So to have that mindset where you really value what you're doing, having kids really brought all of that into focus. I had much less time to work, but I found that I was completing projects at a much higher rate than I was before I had children. All right. My son was born in 2015. All of my books have been published after my first child was born. Not only that, but I wrote more books more quickly in the first 2 years after he was born than I had in the previous 5 years, trying to write. And part of that is I got a lot better, right? I did the reps. I wrote a bunch of crap that sucked and I got the suck out and I got good. I got good enough at least to be able to get through books and publish them. But a bigger part of it as well, or maybe the counter to that, is really just knowing that I had to execute the process and I couldn't sit and stare at a blank page and have any kind of existential question over the book or myself or what the hell I was doing. When that document was open, it was time to write. And I was really good about my uptime. I wrote in my lunch breaks. I wrote when I got home. I made sure I got my word count every single day before I went to sleep, and I pushed it and I got it done. At one point I wrote the Needle Ash books, all three of them, in about 4.5 weeks, right? Just really solidly sticking to the goal and making it happen. I just learned to do that at a better level because I knew that I had a ton of other priorities and I had to really evaluate whether I was spending my time in a way that was going to be beneficial to my goals or not. So yes, being a dad made me a lot more productive because it taught me in a completely better way and a new level how to evaluate the productivity of my time and to make judgments about that a whole lot better than I was before. And it's made me evaluate, how I spend my time with my kids. I want my time with my kids to be spent appropriately, not wasted. I want to enjoy the time with them, but I also want to, as a teacher, I want to be good to them. There's lots of things that I'm constantly thinking about how I can do those things better. But so for people that are afraid, I'm not going to have time to do anything once I have kids, it's yeah, your time gets crunched because the needs of children are intense and they can't be ignored, nor would you want to ignore them because you do love your children. Trust me, when you have kids, you love them. But don't be afraid that like somehow you won't be able to accomplish anything. Rather, you'll have to make decisions about what you want to accomplish and what you want to spend your time doing. There's certain things that I basically have let go as being a father because they're just take up too much time. Playing MMOs was one of them. Like, I can't raid in World of Warcraft. I can, if a new expansion's out and I'm excited to play it, or I have that itch to play, I can like play through the leveling content, maybe do the first raid, and then I'm pretty much done, because that's going to require a higher time commitment. And that time would be better spent on other games to relax, or on work to be productive towards a goal, things like that. So yes, don't be afraid of like losing all your productivity when you have kids. That was always something that my peers were afraid of. I'm not going to have time to work on music. It's like, well, you're spending a lot of time on your music and not really getting any better right now. Maybe that'll help you evaluate whether that 2 hours that you're spending on your music is going to be a fruitful 2 hours, or you're just there to spin your wheels and enjoy being a musician. Not that there's anything wrong with just enjoying playing your instrument for its own sake, but I started to change things to be a lot more like, this step in the process needs to be oriented properly towards the goal. And kids definitely helped me with that. Just to also help me with more experiences. The more experiences you have, the better a writer you have, the more you can write about, the more human you become, the bigger breadth of experience you have, the better your writing's going to be in a lot of cases. And I think children really enhance that as well. So that's kind of it didn't enhance my productivity, but enhanced my quality because I had more life experience. But the productivity part really came from having less time made me more productive with what time I have and more goal oriented. So have a great one. I'll talk to you all next time.